found out the name of the manager of the club, because I knew protocol. I knew you can't go and just really mess everybody up. And I sent a letter saying, is this normal to have it, to the club manager. But I sent copies of the pictures and the letter to the wife of the general commander of the base and the wife of the commandant. These were beginning to pile into Russell House at the Hun School in Princeton, which is the school that my husband was in for 4 years on scholarship. He never saw his parents in 8 years. Now think about this. His parents were shipped to California, I believe strategically so that they could control his mind.
Okay.
He was too poor to fly out there. I think he did go one time when he was ROTC on a flight that took him forever and a day to get out there. But he had an uncle later on who bought a house in Princeton when he was in college. So he had a little bit of nurturing. And this uncle became his father.
Okay.
And this uncle's 2 sons and the next door neighbor became his wife. He knew he had to marry because of what he had gone through, and it was, I think, so shameful and so hard on him that he married right at graduation day, practically, from Princeton University, where he had 4 years in ROTC. And he was in the Cap and Gown Club, which, as I mentioned before, is an intelligence sort of football kind of scholarship club. But what's interesting is my uncle, who was in intelligence, Ben Delaney, went through exactly the same hoops. I was thinking, you know, when I met my husband, this is, and it probably was God in many ways, but I thought, isn't it amazing that Uncle Ben, who was the football quarterback star for Princeton, the one year they won the whole national thing, he was, he went to the Hun School. His father and mother were both killed, or something happened to them. And I think they were fairly well-to-do, prominent family. He was handsome, wonderful, just a neat man. So he went on scholarship to the Hun. And then, and he went in with crew and all these other things. He was in Cap and Gown. He was, he played on the football team. He wasn't a cheerleader. My husband was a cheerleader. But they were in exactly the same pattern. ROTC scholarship. They left ROTC. They were dependent on the government, on the intelligence community, you know, selling weapons to whatever country. I know the country, but in other words, they were doing work for the joint under the table all these years. It's the Israeli Zionist group in New York. Everybody thinks Mossad like they think CIA is just a bogus sort of thing. It's really Army intelligence that does just about everything. They run a lot of the psychological profiling, which is done at Quantico with the FBI. It's all a very small group. Harvard professors connected with, you know, the Tavistock and Dar es Salaam, and there's a sexual perversion group in Vienna and one in Colorado. I think that little girl was part of that experiment. You know, absolutely. Absolutely. Murder, literally murder. And I had a group of visitors. I used to be set up by the State Department, my husband, who had power in the State Department through both Caspar Weinberger and well, his whole crowd. I mean, Caspar Weinberger, George Bush, Colby, Casey. My husband was in that clique. He was in the Princeton Marine Corps clique. Rob, Warner, you know, Marines, Pat Robertson, all 4th Marines. I mean, they're all involved in this. They know they're running everything. Yeah, there's a power thing there, and it's all male, it's all white, and they know the murders are going on. They're surgical, they're strategic, they're political. But what I was going to tell you is I was used because I was the most gullible in high school, and I'm very, very spiritual, and I love people. So, and I was driven to meet all these people from all over the world for some reason. So they would feed me people because they knew I would react. It's kind of like Monica and Bill. I think they put Monica in there to have something on Bill. That's my own feeling. Sarah McClendon feels the same way. Of course, Linda Tripp was Delta Force. Linda Tripp was trained by Carl Steiner, who's in the diary with my husband. Carl Steiner is called a snake, and he tried to trip up Schwarzkopf. I mean, he was trying to take the whole Iraqi thing over because they had been baiting, you know, using the Israeli rogues in Turkey. They were having little zigzag wars. It's all to sell weapons. It's all about weapon sales. It's all about drugs. It's all about funny money. And the head, Krulak, who is the Commandant of the Marine Corps, his father, Victor Krulak, worked with this Russian, Czechoslovakian double agent who was worked with Al Gray, who was enlisted at that time, rose right up to the top because they were involved with Butcher and this whole crowd that was trying to pick fights. And they were Army and Navy together, joint. George calls them the members of the firm. He calls them the members of the firm. I've heard the Brotherhood. They're very close. And it's a small group, and it's very hierarchical. I had Caspar Weinberger's bodyguard farm me when I was at Sarah McClendon. The guys don't see it. So with my husband and so forth, I was used. They profiled me. They knew I loved international people because I'd already demonstrated that. And there was a group of sexual psychiatrists from Vienna who came over. I have pictures of them. I was their escort. George was already gone, and I was intrigued that they were still sending me people. Yeah, there's a whole range of psychiatrists who study perversion, sexual perversion. Harvard, Yale, Johns Hopkins, and this Colorado group. Dar es Salaam, where they train the black African terrorists. They train them in interrogation. They train the JAGs in interrogation methods and so forth. And a lot of these guys got their experience in Vietnam. Intentionally, they took these little boys. That's what they're doing in Bosnia right now. They're training future leaders in perversion. They have a school. The British have a school that George was working with in Indonesia for a year. My husband was setting up there was already a program on East Timor, a little place there in the mountains, that had been set up by the Australians during World War II. It was involved, I think, with Burma and, you know, some of the killings that were going on in China and so forth. That T. Parker Host, this man who now controls my husband with Bob Edwards, T. Parker Host, this is how they got together. T. Parker Host, I knew when I was the assistant director of the Virginia Center for World Trade. I was the first woman on the board of the Foreign Commerce Club. I was very involved politically, and I was having